If you clicked on this video, you probably already know who Alex Hormozi is, but in case you don't, a few years ago, he sold Gym Launch for a $46 million exit, and today he runs acquisition.com, which is a $200 million portfolio company. Most people know him for his $100 million offers and sales strategies, but what most people don't talk about is how deep his expertise and knowledge is on hiring to scale fast and sustainably. Behind the scenes, Alex has one of the most dialed in systems for identifying and onboarding A players. People who don't just take tasks off your plate, but actually drive growth and move the business forward. My name's Chris. I built 3 7-figure businesses by hiring elite remote talent, and I've helped hundreds of business owners do the same through my recruitment service. So in this video, we're gonna find out exactly what Alex Hormozi has to say about hiring, so you can apply the same lessons and insights to scale your own business.
Because right now, all of us are one amazing hire away from all the growth you could ever want. And I promise you that, and I've lived this firsthand, is that a lot of times you don't need a what, you need a who. Right? You're trying to find and figure out this skill. When someone already has that skill and the experience and has already run an Olympic gold multiple times, you just say, hey, can you just run it over here? Rather than trying to figure it all out on your own. It's much faster and simpler, all right?
So there's actually a great book on this. It's called Who, Not How. And the premise of the book is whenever you need to get something done, whether it's a project or a task, or maybe it's a new role or system within your business, you don't want to go out and have to recreate the wheel and figure it out on your own. You want to go and hire a who, meaning a person, and you're not so much concerned about the how, the actual practical steps to execute and get it done. So you, the CEO of your business, as you're building out a team, you're more concerned about going and finding the who's and plugging them into your business, training them, onboarding them, setting them up for success, as opposed to really going out and figuring out the how for every single system and process within your business.
In terms of hiring people, how do you spot an A player?
I will say that I have yet to have an A player that I don't know is an A player within the first week or two.
What are the signs?
They meet, so like support, right? They decrease the likelihood of failure. So they are taking things off my plate really quickly. And they're proactive in terms of their decision making and the actions that they take. A lot of it is really just a tremendous amount of activity, high activity, high alignment. If you have both those things, you have somebody who's moving a lot of things in the right direction, and ideally you get a lot of attention back. And so like if my life gets worse when someone starts, that's a bad sign.
Yeah, you definitely don't want your life to get worse. So there's a good saying to go by out there when it comes to hiring, which is hire slow and fire fast. So you want to take your time and vet a lot of different candidates for whatever role that you're hiring for. And then once you actually hire somebody, you need to be on them like a hawk within the first week or two, because just like Alex said, you'll know if someone's an A player right away. And if there's too many red flags that are indicating that they're not an A player, that's when you want to fire fast and just cut your losses and go find someone else. Now, as far as identifying who an actual A player is, it's pretty difficult to have 100% certainty about that before you hire them. You want to get as certain as you can, and there's a number of things you can do to do that, but you're not going to know for sure until you actually hire them and start working with them. And then once they start working and you get a feel for them and you're seeing how it's playing out day to day, then you'll know if they're an A player. Once the person starts working, if you're having to constantly remind them to do things, if they're not proactive, if they don't really understand how they fit into your business in the big picture and how they're driving growth forward, they're probably not an A player. If you're constantly having to follow up with them to remind them to do stuff, if they're not executing, if they're missing deadlines, things like that, then they're not an A player. If the person is driving things forward without you having to ask, if they're building out new areas of your business or improving processes or training members of your team and really going above and beyond to drive things forward and just get stuff done day to day, they're probably an A player.
Now, in terms of the characteristics, I'm going to be borrowing this from Warren Buffett. Intelligence, which I define as super relevant experience and having solved the problem that I'm looking to solve, right? I'm hiring for solutions. I'm not hiring for positions. And I think if we can be very clear about what problem we are trying to solve, we'll be much better at defining the problem so we get much more clear about the solution. So number one is he says intelligence. I just define that a little bit more nuanced to have this person solve the problem in a business just like mine.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So what you don't want to do is take a role and then hire somebody and have to train them from scratch. They have no specific knowledge. They don't have a lot of expertise or experience executing on whatever it is that you're hiring them for. In a perfect world, you have a defined role within your specific industry industry. And then you can go and hire someone who's worked in your industry in that specific role. They come in, they know exactly what to do without you having to tell them because they've done it before. And that's a good example of hiring a who and not trying to reinvent the wheel and go and figure out how.
The second is he calls it energy, I call it work ethic, right? And the way that you would judge that for me is, what's the speed of response when we're interacting with this person? If I ask them for something, how quickly do they get it to me? Just general communication style, because we like to move quickly. And I know that if they're not moving quickly during the interview process, I'm not going to expect it to move faster afterwards. That is how I measure that. And then the third is character, right? Which is difficult, right? He says integrity, but just I would say character in general. And the underpinnings of that, which is the fourth piece, is do they have a long-term perspective?
All right, so obviously you want them to be intelligent. That's the first characteristic that you need to look for. And then number two that Alex talks about is you need to find someone with energy. So how quickly are they moving things forward? If you're anything like me, which I'm sure you are, if you're a business owner, you're not sitting around waiting for people to get stuff done. You're not sitting around waiting for people to get back to you. You're trying to move things forward on a day-to-day basis, and you have a lot of momentum behind you, and you don't want that momentum to slow down. So one way that you can spot this ahead of time before you actually hire the person, you onboard them, you start working with them, is look at how they show up during the actual interview process. Alex actually mentioned that in the video. If they're rescheduling interviews, especially at the last minute, like sometimes people will book interviews with us and then like 30 minutes before the interview, they're like, hey, I actually have a conflict, I need to reschedule. That's a huge red flag. Why didn't you sort that out ahead of time? Why are you letting us know last second? That's just not really the professionalism that we're looking for. Now, conversely, during the interview process, if they're on time, if they're flexible, if they're adhering to all of your standards throughout the process, that's a green flag. That's going to be someone who's actually going to be easier to work with, who's serious about pushing things forward, who has the sense of urgency, and who really wants the job. The reason this is so important is that you're going to have a lot of stuff to get done day to day. And if this person is not a quick communicator, if they don't get stuff done quickly, they don't have a sense of urgency, you're obviously going to be slowed down. And the most important thing in your business is momentum.
Is do they have a long-term perspective?
In a perfect world, everyone that you hire is going to stick around for many, many years. The last thing you want to do is hire people short-term and then have to go out, find someone new, replace that person. It's just not the way to go. As you work with your staff for a longer period of time, they're going to get better at what they're doing. They're going to get more experience, more expertise, and your business is really just going to benefit from those compounded results. One way you can easily check to see if a person has a long-term perspective or not before you hire them is just look at their past experience, look at their resume and where they've worked in the past. A lot of the people that apply to our clients' jobs in the Philippines or Latin America, they've been bouncing around from job to job like every couple months. It's very common to see applicants that have only stayed in their previous roles for 2, 3, or 4 months before leaving and going to another role. This is a great example of someone that does not have a long-term perspective and they're very short-term focused, only thinking about getting paid right now. They're not thinking about how they can benefit a business for the long run. They're not thinking about how they're going to get better in their role in the long run, and you want to avoid those people like the plague. Now, conversely, if you find somebody that applies to a role who is in their last job for 5 to maybe even 10 years, that's a perfect example of someone that is long-term focused, and assuming that you have a successful business and a good relationship with the person, there's a high probability that they'll stick around in your business for the long run as well. For example, I have someone in my call center business who worked at JP Morgan for over 12 years before I hired him. When he applied for the role, we instantly saw that on his resume, and that was a green flag for us. So we really prioritized interviewing this individual. And after interviewing him, we confirmed that he was an A player. And then I hired him. And now many years later, he's still working for me. And my thesis of hiring people who stayed in their last roles for a long time, translating into people who will stick with me for a long term, ended up being very much correct. And I've proven this time and time again for people that I have personally hired.
When we're approaching these interviews, we keep it front of mind, which is like, what am I looking for right now? They got on the interview because they have the track record. Okay. The correspondence has been speedy-ish. What I'm really looking for is the character that I think can lead this component in the company, and do they have the teeth to really want to drive? Which a lot of people don't.
Got it.
right? And you still get it
they,
wrong. You just have fewer mistakes.
This is a great point because once you set up an interview with someone, they already have the past experience that you're looking for. Ideally, their correspondence leading up to the interview and actually booking it had some sense of urgency. It displayed some professionalism. They've already been screened on a very fundamental level. And then once you get into the interview, now you need to look for a specific character. Who are they as a person? What is their character as a human being? Is this person going to be moving like a sloth? Are they going to go through the motions? When you're speaking to them in the interview, are they sitting back very passively? They're not asking engaging questions. Are they giving you robotic scripted answers? These are some things that should be very obvious when you're interviewing people to determine if they're going to be an A player. Now, alternatively, are they showing up to the interview very proactively? Are they asking thoughtful questions about how they can fit into the role and ultimately into your business and how that role is going to drive your business forward? Are they asking thoughtful questions like, how do you measure my performance? What will determine if I'm exceptional in the role? Are they excited about the opportunity? Is this person coming off to you as someone who has drive, who's going to take initiative and proactively move things forward? These are some of the things that you can spot in that initial interview, which will end up translating into a higher probability that the person will be an A player once you actually hire them.
And using the interview process itself as a learning process for you. So when you talk to, let's say, 10 of these high-level marketing people and you ask, no, specifically, what would you do? Because that is part of our interview process. I want to know specifically what you would do. We had one guy who's like, well, I'm not going to share that with you until you hire me. We're like, next, right? So another guy, and then he wrote this massive thing about how we were horrible and it's so unprofessional to expect that. And I was like, thank God we didn't hire you. And so, so the other guys were all like, I would do this, I would do this, I would do this, I would do this. And the thing is by the 10th interview, we've got a list of like 30 really good ideas. And we have other guys who are like, what do you think about this? It's like, oh, I have experience with those things. And so the interviews get better and better and better as we get more really nuanced information and solutions from people who've already done it.
These are some great points. Let's say you're going to hire a who, and because you don't know how and you're looking for the who, you don't exactly know how the role works or what the person's going to do practically speaking once they get hired and come into your business. You can use these interviews as an educational process for yourself to figure out what these people will actually do practically, the how, once they come into your business. And then as you go through more and more interviews and you gather more information from the candidate's perspective about what they're doing, you can become more aware of what things will look like once they start working for you. And then as you go through each interview, your conversations and your interviews with these candidates can go into more depth, it can become more nuanced, and you can get a better idea about who's actually the best fit. One practical, like really simple question that you can ask people when you're interviewing them is, if I were to hire you and you come into my business tomorrow, what are you actually going to do to move things forward with X, Y, and Z, depending on what the conversation's about? And then see how they respond. Do they give you this like cookie cutter, robotic, not very nuanced answer where you can easily see this person doesn't actually know what they're doing? Or do they actually give you an articulate, elaborate vision about what they're going to do practically speaking once they come into your business? If they do, then you know that you found your who, because they actually know how, and they're probably going to be an A player.
How are you going to retain and ascend your talent? How are you going to retain them? So how are you going to continue to motivate them so that they want to continue to perform? That's the retention aspect. And then how do we select the star players and ascend them to higher levels and put them on a fast track so that they can move up within the company, get more responsibility and make more impact to the bottom line in the business? The biggest companies in the world, it's because they have such amazing talent acquisition systems and retention and ascension systems for identifying talent and allowing them to move up.
Okay, these are great points. I've talked about this in other videos. Some roles that you hire for, there won't be any ability to ascend, and you're just hiring people to stay in a role long term. For example, maybe it's a customer service position and you just need to hire someone to answer phone call after phone call after phone call every single day, and you don't really want to deal with having to ascend them later on. So if you're hiring someone for a repetitive role where there is no ability to ascend, you need to make sure while you're interviewing people that you don't hire somebody who does want to ascend. Because if you do, there's a good chance chance they're going to outgrow the role. They're either going to start looking for another job, or they're going to ask you to grow within the company, and then you're going to have to backfill that initial role. So keep that in mind. Now, if it is a role where there is potential to grow and you don't mind backfilling their existing role later on, then you need to have a plan going into this relationship when you hire this person about how you're going to grow this person in the long run. Because many of the A players that you hire, they don't want to just stick doing the same thing over and over and over. That's mainly B players or even C players who hopefully you're not hiring at all. So the A players that you're hiring, they usually want growth, they want more opportunity, they want more responsibility, they want to move up within your company. The only way for you to really grow and thrive as a business is to hire A players and retain those A players. So if A players want to grow and they want more opportunity and you don't provide them with a path to grow and have more opportunity, guess what? Someone else is going to steal your A players and they're going to leave and work for someone else. And obviously, if that's happening to you, your business is going to fail. You're not going to get anywhere. So as you're hiring and you're onboarding these A players, you need to be thinking through how you're going to grow them and how you're going to give them more opportunity. And then you need to have a serious conversation with them up front during your onboarding when you're setting expectations and learning about their expectations about what they even want to do in the long run. That way you guys can work together to develop a career path for this individual to make sure that you can retain them. Because like I was saying before, the longer that you retain staff within your business, the more compounded results you're going to get over time. People are going to become so much more intimately familiar with whatever they're doing within your business, and everyone's going to benefit from that.
So if any of you has ever been on a championship team, right? If you've ever played in a sports arena or whatever, and you've been on a winning team, you've been on a losing team, right? And you've probably been on a losing team that had a lot of good players, but you guys were not connected, you weren't concerted, you weren't aligned, right? On the flip side, you had a winning team and it was like everyone showed up to practice, everyone, tried their hardest. It was the effort and the consistency and the alignment of the team that accomplished the goal. The rules are the same. Everyone was trying to do the exact same thing.
So culture is everything, and culture really starts with you as the leader. You're setting the standard for what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable within your organization, and everyone else that works for you is going to follow that. You also need to make sure that you're not hiring B and C players because they're going to drag down the A players. They're going to frustrate them. And ultimately, the A players are not going to want to work with them, and they'll have a much higher probability of leaving your business. And like I've been saying over and over, the way for you to succeed and thrive as a business is to hire A players and retain them for as long as humanly possible. You want to avoid losing the A players at all costs. So if hiring B and C players is going to push those A players away, you need to avoid the B and C players. The B and C players' bad habits, poor attitudes, and overall just cancerous nature are going to pull down the standards, the productivity, and everything that the A players are doing down to the B and C players levels. So you need to do the following. One, you need to avoid the B and C players like the plague. And then two, you as the leader need to set the standard of work quality and how your organization is going to run and the behavior that is acceptable from everyone in the organization.
Us as CEOs, we do shift towards becoming championship team coaches, which is why John Wooden, if he had run a business, would have had a championship business because he focused on the fundamentals. And one of my favorite sayings of all time is, advanced people never don't do the basics. Advanced people never don't do the basics. This has been one of the most profound shifts that I've had is what I'm looking for just as much soft, if not more, soft skills, interpersonal dynamics, self-awareness than I look for skill. In particular, like this guy's really good at finance, this person's really good at product, this person's really good at marketing, sales. Like, I'm looking way more for character traits now.
Yeah, I agree with this. So you as the CEO of your company, you're basically the equivalent of a coach of a sports team. And if you're the coach and all of your staff are the players and you need to coach the players, if your players are not coachable, you're screwed. Every person that you hire that comes into your business, they're going to require some coaching, training, and some direction. It's going to be incredibly rare that someone doesn't, and they're just going to come in and they're going to plug and play into your business and know exactly what to do. Everyone's going to require some form of ongoing coaching. And you, as a CEO, you need to coach these people and raise their standards and raise their work quality. Now, if you've hired people that are not receptive to coaching and you go and give them feedback and they're defensive or they have very poor self-awareness, you're going to have a really hard time upskilling these people. You're going to have a really hard time leading the team. If you have too many people that are defensive, that are not coachable, this is ultimately just going to end up being a huge energy sucked to you. It's going to be very frustrating and very unenjoyable. If you're getting your energy sucked and you hate what you're doing because everyone is just being so difficult, you're not going to be successful. Part of being an A player involves being coachable. It involves self-awareness. Let me give you an example. So there's a guy that I hired who onboards all of my clients. He's a great guy. His name's Sharif. Sharif, if you're watching this, you're doing a great job. He's located in Egypt, and his job is to meet with the clients when they sign up. He explains the service to them. He gets everything set up. He onboards them, and he basically just sets us up for success with the client. He is the first impression of our organization to our client other than the salespeople, so his role is very important. He's doing a good job with the onboarding meetings, and then after the onboarding meeting, he had to go do some more administrative work to get things set up. And there was a specific part of this process on the admin side of things after the onboarding call that Sharif kept screwing up, and it was starting to cause some problems. Some clients were getting a little frustrated right off the bat, so we sat down with Sharif and we were like, hey Sharif, what's the deal? What's going on? How do we help you? Where do you need support? How do we streamline this and just set you up for success? So he gave us an explanation of what was going on. He exhibited very strong self-awareness. He said, you know what? I think I'm really good at these things. I'm absolutely terrible at this, and I apologize. I know that I need to improve on this, but I'm just not very good at it for X, Y, and Z reasons. The average person, a B or a C player, during this conversation would have probably made some excuses. They wouldn't have owned up to their mistakes. They may have lied about their mistakes. They danced around it. They're basically just trying to preserve their confidence in the moment and stay comfortable and in their comfort zone. They don't want to feel vulnerable. They don't want to admit that they made a mistake. Now, an A player doesn't care about being vulnerable. They're happy to be vulnerable. They don't care about being uncomfortable in this conversation. They recognize the mistake or the error or the weakness head on, and they're willing to address it and have a conversation about it. That means this person is coachable. There actually is something there that you can work with. They're open-minded to feedback. They know that there's a problem. They have self-awareness. B and C players lack self-awareness. They might be completely oblivious that they're not good at something. An A player knows what they're good at and what they're not great at and what they need to improve upon. So throughout this video, we looked at how Alex Hormozi thinks about hiring, and we broke down the exact principles about how he's built world-class teams. But just knowing what to look for in an A player isn't enough if you don't have the time or the systems to actually go out and find one. That's why if you're a business owner who's overwhelmed and stuck doing everything yourself, my team and I can help. We run a done-for-you recruitment service where we handle the entire process, from sourcing candidates to vetting them and shortlisting the top ones, and delivering top-tier VAs that you can trust without the cost of US salaries. We've helped hundreds of business owners build reliable remote teams and free up their time, and we can help you do the same. If that sounds like what you need, book a free call with my team. You can find the link in the description. Hit subscribe if you want more actionable videos on building better teams and scaling your business. I'll see you in the next one.